About a month ago, I came out to do my first real night's hammocking, and I think it's fair to say it was one of the worst night's sleep I've ever had in the woods. Why? Well, it was all down to my Thermarest inflatable mat that I put underneath me, between my backside and the hammock. It spent the entire night slipping and sliding out from underneath me, resulting in me having a very cold night's sleep, resulting in me getting out the hammock and sleeping on the floor. Fast forward a month, and I think I've come up with a solution. Hi folks, I'm Craig Taylor, and as always, a huge thanks for joining me here on my YouTube channel, the Bushcraft Padawan. If you've watched any of my previous videos where I'm talking about considering hammocking, you'll know one of the things that's put me off in the past is the amount of kit that you seem to need to take with you over and above what you take out for a normal night's sleep anyway. So you've got to take the hammock itself, an underquilt, an overquilt. To me, it all just seems like extra gubbins. I thought I was being clever by using the inflatable mat as an ad hoc underquilt by allowing that thermal insulation to take place via the Thermarest inflatable mat. But as we've just discussed, that didn't work because it spent the entire night slipping out from underneath me, from the side of me, out the foot of the hammock, that I ditched the whole idea. So I can kind of understand why people do use underquilts, but I'm averse to using one because to me it's just something else to take out with you. So let's fast forward a month from that previous less than perfect overnighter. The guy that I bought the original hammock from is a guy called Chris. He's got his own business, Wild and Free. I'm going to post links to his eBay, Instagram and Facebook pages below this video in the YouTube description. If you're UK based and you're looking at getting outdoorsy, hammocky type of gear, then do check what Chris is doing out. He's building his business himself. It's a cottage business, cottage industry, and he's doing really, really well in these early days. So why not check what he's doing out and support him? He sent me this. This is one of his prototype over quilts. So it's not an underquilt, it doesn't go under the hammock, it's an overquilt. It's just like a quilt at home. It goes over the top of you to keep you warm from above. Now personally, I don't think I need an overquilt because I have a sleeping bag, and the sleeping bag keeps me warm from above, and to a lesser degree it keeps me warm from below, bearing in mind its insulation properties aren't as great because you're compressing any insulation, any down, any synthetic filling below you. But it does a great job of keeping me warm above and to the sides, but not a great job from keeping me warm below. Hence my reasoning and my rationale for using the roll mat. So I didn't really think that I needed this. Then he sent it to me and I looked at the size of it when it's compressed down, and it's slightly larger, fair to say, it's slightly larger than my Thermarest, but not hugely. It's slightly larger, but not massively so. So I started thinking to myself, this is an overquilt. It is designed to go over the top of me. It's not an underquilt. But I wonder if I could hack this. I wonder if I could modify this in some way to act as an underquilt, meaning that I don't have to take my Thermarest, what's the word I'm looking for? My Thermarest inflatable mat. I had a brain fart then. My Thermarest inflatable mat. I don't have to take that out with me. So I am taking slightly more, but not a great deal more. I wonder if this could solve the problem. So I've come out today, I've got a couple of trees cunningly placed, conveniently placed just behind me. I'm going to put the hammock up and I'm actually going to experiment with this and see just how I might be able to use it as an underquilt and therefore drop taking out my Thermarest when I'm planning to hammock. Let's see how we get on. Ta-da! Hello. Hola. In the interests of research, of course, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to lay in this hammock wearing just a pair of shorts so my legs are exposed, a t-shirt so fairly thin, my arms are exposed. I just want to lay here for 5 or 10 minutes, again, purely in the name of research, the things that I have to go through in order to give you peer research, scientifically proven, quantifiable information on my channel is it's a hardship, but somebody's got to do it. So I'm going to spend 5 or 10 minutes laying here on my backside just to feel how cool it is underneath me, how cold it gets, whether I feel like I could hack it for any more than 5 or 10 minutes. Then I'm going to take a look at this overquilt slash underquilt and see if I can modify that to give me a little bit of insulation underneath. So if you'll excuse me, if you could keep the noise down at the back, I'm now going to undertake this, this scientific period of research. Back in a few. I've been laid here for about 10 minutes, and although it is a very warm day, it's been a scorching weekend here on the south coast of England, although it is a very warm day, I could still feel in all the back of the calves, small of the back, shoulder blades, upper arms, where it was in contact with the hammock, I could feel that get cooler and cooler and cooler in just the 10 minutes that I was laid here on a relatively warm day. So I could certainly see how if I was laid here for longer, later in the day, during the night, how that cold would amplify and it would be a cold, uncomfortable night's sleep. Let's turn my attention then to this overquilt that I was talking about. Let me get it out of the bag and show you what it is. If you've ever used a quilt, then you'll be fairly familiar with what an overquilt looks like. There we have it there. It's a big old piece of material. It's got a synthetic filling in there. And it's a fairly rectangular shape that you may notice a slight angle there, you may not. That's the footbox section. Along the edges of this, it has some press studs. And those press studs marry up at the other side, and I could press stud this together. So what I'd be essentially able to do if I was to press stud enough of these together, and I'll do it now on camera because there's nothing more exciting than watch somebody pop a couple of press studs together on camera. I know it's what you tune in for. If I press stud those together there, I've joined it there, I've joined it there, I've joined it there, and I've joined it there, and there's also press stud at the very top. Oh no, there isn't. I've essentially formed, if you like, an open-ended sleeping bag. If I step back, I've sort of got this open-ended sleeping bag shenanigans going on, and at either end there is also some shock cord with a couple of draw locks on it so I could cinch the end of those up. And I imagine if I was using this as an overquilt, I would cinch up the end, one end, I would lay this over me as a normal quilt, and my feet would be in the cinched up end, acting as a footbox there. Or of course, if I wasn't that tall, I wasn't worried about a footbox, I could just unpop the whole lot, loosen off these draw cords, and I basically have a very lightweight, very warmth to weight, high warmth to weight ratio overquilt to go on top of me. But remember what I said, I want to keep using my sleeping bag, but I want something that insulates me from below. So I've been looking at this and I've been thinking to myself, how could I, without needing to unpick anything or modify this, how could I just hack the way that I use this and turn this into an underquilt? And I think I've come up with the answer. Now, I've never done this before, camera or off camera, so it maybe take a little bit of toing and froing. I may edit out some of the shuffling around, but this is the very start of the process. I've never done this before. You are seeing this for real. At one end of the quilt, I'm just going to press stud that together over the guy line there, and I'm going to cinch the ends up. There, cinching the end up. I actually think I've realised what I've done wrong here, but I'll carry on with it. I'm going to carry on with this train of thought. I'm then going to repeat this exact same process, but at the other end of the hammock. I think I've seen my own problem here, which is that this quilt isn't as long as the hammock, but I've also seen a way that I can get around it. But stay with me for now. I'm going to try and replicate this at the other end. I'm now at the other end of the hammock, and look, no overquilt in my hands, because the overquilt is halfway to 2/3 of the way down the hammock. So that approach of using the press studs at either end to cocoon the hammock in isn't going to work. And thinking about it, the problem with using the press studs is they're not adjustable. Once the press stud is fixed, it's fixed. There's no give, there's no adjustment, there's no slackening or tightening up with a press stud. It's either open and not doing its job, or it's closed, doing its job, but non-adjustable. So I'm now thinking of revisiting that end, and instead of using the press studs, I'm going to use that adjustable yellow shock cord that you saw me tighten up earlier on, because that can still, I hope, maintain a sense of adhesion of the underquilt to the underside of the hammock, but it's adjustable and it will have a little bit of give in it, unlike a press stud. Join me back at that end again. Ta-da! Right, let's forget the press stud. Let's get rid of that. Let's slacken off these bungee cords a little, and let me just very, very sloppily, let me just do an overhand knot in this. It's actually a quick release overhand knot there. I've put a little loop in there. So now you can see there's an element of give in this, which means that I could pull this further towards that end than I could when it's press stud, because the press stud doesn't give. So again, I'm going to try and replicate what I've done at this end at that end. Let's see how we get on. Relatively same process has now been repeated at this end. There is the underquilt, just bringing it into shock. There's a piece of the yellow shock cord. I've tied those off again with a secure but a quick release knot here. I also need to make sure that it's a knot that I can undo under tension, because once it's been under tension, so imagine once I get my backside in here, things are going to tighten up easily. I want this to be able to be undone at both ends without coming undone when I don't want it to. So if I show you now that the length of this as it sits at the moment, bearing in mind there's no weight on it, hopefully it'll give you an idea of what I've done. So there we can see, just, you can hardly see the hammock now. You see it at one end there in the centre of the frame, and back at this end you can see it again in the centre of the frame. But the actual area that I would be lying in, which, let's be honest, is the important area, that's the area my skin's going to be touching, is kind of hidden by the whole underquilt. And if I just peel this overquilt back, there's the hammock in there. So here's my hypothesis. When I put my weight in this hammock, the hammock's going to do its job as it normally is. I'm hoping that the bungee cord in the what is now an underquilt will expand, will stay nice and tight to the underside of that hammock, because there's a lot of tension in it, and that will act as my base layer of insulation, if you like, my thermal barrier against the air passing underneath the hammock. But there's only one way to find out, isn't there? So let's move this camera back to the original position so you can see the whole length of the hammock, and I'll get back in it and test this theory out. Moment of truth. Ooh. Okay, fine. Let's take the old shoes off. Take the shoes off before you come in. There we go, shoes are off. Okay, so it doesn't, to be honest, it doesn't feel any different, not from a temperature perspective, but it doesn't feel like I'm cocooned in more. Things don't feel tighter, they don't feel more under tension. There feels no different structurally getting in this hammock than there did before, but I can't comment on it from a temperature perspective just yet. But I'm just sort of feeling under myself. Certainly from my calves or my ankles, I can feel the hammock all the way underneath me and I can actually see that it extends slightly above my head. So by my feet, everything appears to be cocooned in with this overquilt slash underquilt. I am mindful that my foot end here, I can actually see, because it's a nice bright day, I can actually see the underquilt against the hammock. You can't see this, but I can see where the shadow's being cast, and I can certainly see that because the underquilt is being gathered to a point where everything is cinched and under pressure, my feet are not at that point. My feet are off to a side because this is a side lay hammock. So my feet are not being cocooned into the underquilt, which could, of course, be a real problem. But certainly, literally everything from my ankles or my mid calves upwards is very definitely cocooned in. I can see that and I can feel that, and I suspect if I lay here for a few minutes, I will certainly feel that it is warmer to lie in than it was a few minutes ago when I laid here, purely in the interest of research for a few minutes. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to lie here and just see what the temperature difference is on my calves, the back of my upper arms, small of my back and my shoulders, which is where I reported earlier on that I felt there was a little bit of heat loss. Taking one for the team again. I've been laid here now for about a minute, 90 seconds if I'm being generous, and without wishing to sound cliched, I can absolutely feel the difference. I can feel now that the heat loss is occurring from the upper parts of my limbs, the tops of my arms, my shins, my chest. That's where I can feel the heat loss occurring from. Feel the wind blowing over it and it being cool slightly, but nothing, absolutely nothing from underneath as there was before. Before I realised it within 2 or 3 minutes, I could feel myself cooling down the point where my body was in contact with the hammock. It's absolutely not the case now. It may be the case if I stayed here longer where my feet and ankles are, because as I say, they are off kilter, they are askew from where the actual underquilt is doing its work. But I reckon I could get around that. I've got a lot of underquilt above my head. So I'm just thinking if I was to adjust, if I was to slacken the tension off at that end of the underquilt and tighten it up at the foot end of the underquilt, that would pull things along towards my feet a little more, possibly give me a little more insulation. But as I've said, it's more, I think, to do with the fact that my feet are askew, because this is a diagonal lay hammock, whereas the underquilt is in line with the ridge line here, I guess, the structural line here. It's in line with that. My feet are askew. So although I'm going to experiment with shuffling it all down a little, I don't think that's the root cause of the problem. Back to the research. If you get motion sickness, you'd best stop watching now, because I'm rocking all over the place. I've got out the hammock. Trust me, I have actually got out the hammock today. I didn't adjust that end as I said I would a few seconds ago, but I did tighten that end up, so it's pulled everything tighter. And as I hope you can see, I don't know, but at my foot end here, I am most definitely now, my feet are cocooned, not just in the hammock, but more importantly in the underquilt. I don't seem to have lost any insulation at the other side. I've lost no insulation over my right shoulder. I've lost nothing over my left shoulder. And it's now in line, probably with the base of my neck, the back of my neck. So everything's just been pulled a little tighter. I've not lost any insulation anywhere. I'm not robbing Peter to pay Paul, but critically, I've now got it in that foot box area. And off camera, I've been laid here for probably 20-25 minutes, and it feels incredibly warm. I can feel the wind over the top of me. I can feel nothing underneath whatsoever. So I am quietly confident that this could have actually solved that problem. let's just think through the logistics of what I've done and what I'll need to do in the future. I don't believe there's any need for me to bring out, when I'm hammocking from now on, my inflatable, Thermarest inflatable mattress. I don't think there's any need for that. So I've saved some space. I will need to bring out this overquilt that I'm now calling my underquilt. So some of the space and weight that I've gained from the Thermarest has been taken up with this and a little more. As I said earlier in the video, this is probably slightly heavier and probably slightly larger, although I've not truly compacted it down, than my roll mat. So it's not there's no space or weight saving, there's no like for like. I think I'm carrying ever so slightly, fractionally more. I think I can live with that. I would still come out with my sleeping bag. I would still probably come out with a bivvy bag, although I'd be keen to explore what sleeping like is without a bivvy bag, because it's been a very long time since I've slept without a bivvy bag, either in the army or in Civvy Street. I'd still of course bring the hammock and the tarp and everything else that I use, so there's no space savings there. So all in all, quite pleased that I did this experiment. From what I've been able to test this afternoon in a relatively mild day, I've been able to notice a difference between not using this and using this. So if I take that comparison to an evening to a night time, I think I'd still be able to feel the same difference. It's been interesting. What have we learnt today then? I think I don't know what you've learnt, maybe nothing. What I've learnt, think about the kit that you've got, which was this quilt, this top quilt here, and think about how you can repurpose stuff. Just because you've got kit for a certain purpose that goes by a certain name and is generally considered to solve problem A, doesn't mean that it can't solve problem B or C or X or Y or Z. So thinking laterally about the kit that you've got and how you can use it to solve other problems is an important thing. That's one thing I've learned. I think the second thing I've learned as well, to demonstrate some humility, is I said I would never use, I actually think I said I would never buy an under or over quilt, and technically I haven't, because Chris has been incredibly generous. Chris, if you're watching this, a massive thank you. I know I've already said thank you, but I'm saying it officially now, publicly, a public thank you for sending me this prototype here. I know it's a very early stage iteration of the great work that you're doing, but thank you for sending me this. I've got some feedback that I'm going to send you privately about it, all positive stuff, just some comments on the press studs and things like that, but all in all, a fantastic bit of kit for this being one of your first iterations. It would no doubt at all be a fantastic top quilt, but as you can see, it's proving to be a very good underquilt as well. And of course I will let you know, Chris, and everybody else that's watching, what it's actually like for an overnighter when using this, because I'm very conscious that I've not replicated that just by coming out for an hour or so this afternoon. So big takeaways from me: looking at other ways of using the same piece of kit to solve other problems, and never say never. I said I'd never use an underquilt or maybe buy one, and here I am using one, and fully intend to use one on my next overnighter. If you're interested in looking at my recent hammocking videos, then if you look across on this side of the screen across here, I duck out of the way, you will see some of my more recent videos in which I go out hammocking. Why not take a look at those if you've not seen them already, and just see how my thinking has changed from those videos to this videos. As always folks, a massive thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.